Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Let's talk about Texas A&M, but play that sound first, please. Ooh, yeah, brother. 5-7 last year for A&M, and we're talking about 10 wins, man.
Yeah.
Again, context is really important with A&M.
Well, we're talking about 10 wins because they've been the 8-win program.
They have been the 8-win program. Jimbo Fisher was brought in to make them a 10-win program, make them a contender.
Sure.
The important context that we should add about A&M, at least over the short term, the last 2 seasons, is despite the infusion of talent, the historic infusion of talent that we saw with the 2022 class, A&M's been very unlucky on the injury front. They were really beat up 2 years ago. The hope was that they'd be a little luckier last season. They weren't. Both Max Johnson and Haynes King got hurt. If anything good came from that, it's that they found Connor Wegman, who threw 8 touchdowns to no interceptions. He figures to be the guy now moving forward. But even like Anaya Smith going down for the year, that was such a big loss because of how versatile he was in the offense. The line was beat up. Some guys went down for the year. Even Devin A-Chain, had a boot on by the end of the year. So they were as beat up as they have ever been. And defense was just as nicked up, although they were able to kind of hold that together. So you can't chalk the whole thing up to injuries, but injuries definitely played a pretty big part in at least what we've seen over the last 2 seasons for A&M.
Yeah.
The issue that I have with A&M is I think it's coaching.
Yeah.
And I'm not any kind of rocket scientist to lay that in front of you and ask for your opinion. Because honestly, as we've been talking through all of these teams now, it comes down to, are they getting talent? Minnesota, are they getting talent? K-State, are they getting talent? We talked about Pitt earlier in the week. Are they getting talent? How are they getting talent? What are they doing with that talent? It's so much been a conversation around how are they getting the talent? And with A&M, it's not that. A&M is getting the talent. A&M has all the pieces that they need. It would certainly be helpful to not have all the injuries. But on some level, there's really nowhere for Jimbo Fisher to hide. And I think that's why we have weird discussions about, in the offseason, should Jimbo be fired if it doesn't work out this year? He's getting the talent. He's not producing with that talent. And we need to figure out why. Now, I think he is trying to figure out why. I think he knows it's probably not just a coaching thing, but a coaching offense thing. And that's why he brings in Bobby Petrino. And though some of the comments have been weird here in the offseason, I hope he's been self-aware enough to recognize that they've got to modernize things and change it on the offensive side of the ball, that what he did at Florida State is not working. Not working at A&M.
Right.
And wasn't even working at Florida State before he left. But it just seems to me like this is such an obvious answer that we didn't need a guest to tell us, frankly.
I mean, lock Jimbo Fisher out of the offensive meeting rooms, turn his headset channel to something else during the games. That's the answer for Texas A&M right now, because it's not going to be a talent acquisition thing. It's not going to be we've spoken to a number of guests and they've talked about, it's an NIL thing, right? We talked about West Virginia. We've talked about UCLA, where we're just like, they can't compete. They're going to lose guys to the portal. They're not going to be able to compete on the recruiting trail in the modern era. Not true for Texas A&M. It's just not. Now, what they also need is they need one or both of the Mississippi schools to be very bad, right? They probably need some sort of padding within the division for as long as there is a division in the SEC. So they probably need something like that. Look, they were on the edge of the playoff 2 years ago. And they did it because they were as complete. They had a great defensive coordinator. Jimbo's had a great eye for defensive coordinators, and DJ Durkin and Mike Elko. So that's not the issue to me. And they're going to have another very strong defensive line. We'll see. They've got a lot of young talent elsewhere on defense that's not necessarily fully proven. But the lines are good. They've got one of the best, 3 receivers in the conference? Maybe the country, and Evan Stewart. The best of Evan Stewart is pretty incredible. They haven't been able to figure out quarterback, mixed with Jimbo's offensive philosophy. I'm not going to say it's impossible for them to make that move to 10-3 and 9-2, because kind of at the end of the day, have a decent quarterback, rush the quarterback decently. And it looks like they're on that path, but their own scheduling path is always going to be such that, like, they can't lose the 50-50 games, and they definitely can't shoot themselves in the foot in one of those games and survive. That, to me, is the issue with Texas A&M, that when they have these winnable games, be it against one of the Mississippi schools, one of, LSU, these back and forths, that it can't be Jimbo making big offensive decisions. It just can't be. And so that's the issue to me, because, look, they've had full-on star power on both sides of the ball these past few years. Now it's just an issue of constructing a game plan and being aggressive throughout the game, noticing what's working, noticing what's not working, leaning in, having that counter, having that out pitch, whatever you want to call it. And for a stretch, when, it was the 2020 COVID year, they go 9-1. They've got star power at running back, right? They're riding the running game, and it's working really well. Kellen Mond is at least decent outside of that. But you're talking 10 wins consistently in the SEC West means quarterback, rushing the quarterback. Everything else is just smart decisions in game. Get out of the way and enjoy the W's. That's it. So I put it at a 27% chance of happening, just because it's hard to change track record when you have so many data points now. But I can see a universe in which Texas A&M makes that leap. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Petrino thing is interesting because we're not talking about the highest moral character guy, but among other things, he was known for being an offensive guru, and he was known for being adaptable. Mm-hmm. And that is something that this version of the Jimbo offense has not so much been. So for Petrino, whether it was Lamar Jackson or Brian Braum, he was able to figure out what those guys did well and make the offense hum around it. On the Jimbo side, I mean, just take last year. I used this example before a couple months ago, but in the game last year against App State, Haynes King was something like 13 of 20 for 97 yards. He was under pressure only 3 times in 24 dropbacks. They didn't blitz him at all.
Yeah.
They didn't blitz him at all.
Why would you?
And he had that stat line. He also fumbled twice. And look, Haynes King, we can have a discussion about Haynes King, but Jimbo loved Haynes King. If that was the best he could do after being then 2 years in the offense, it tells you that too much was going on. I mean, he was hurt for the entirety of one of those years. Yeah. He was hurt, but he still was around the offense. And he still knew what was supposed to be going on. It just seemed like there was so much happening. You hear it often about an offense or a defensive scheme that there's so much happening that players have to think. They can't react. They're not just going from muscle memory.
Right.
And it seems like a lot of that was going on for A&M last season and the season prior. So if they can get away from that, if Petrino can simplify things, if he can make the most of the athleticism that's out there, I think they'll be in a better place. And I think they stand to maybe gain immediately. I take what you're saying, and I think you're right about it's hard to kind of switch very quickly and make things better very quickly.
Right.
But simplifying can have that effect if he's able to do it effectively. Now, there have been some weird comments about how hands-off Jimbo will be with respect to that offense.
Mm-hmm.
We will see. That's one of the great unknowns going into the 23 season. But Petrino's got a track record. He's a good offensive coach, and we'll see if he can do it here.
How many teams right now in college football have 10-win talent and just have not won 10, right? How many teams, when you look across the landscape, you're like, oh, yeah, they've recruited well enough. You can see that they have dudes at this position group, dudes at this position group. They have game changers here. Their lines are solid, and they've got rotational guys that are solid, and don't ever meet the moment that they just, like, if Texas A&M only loses to more talented teams, they'll go 10-2 every year, because right now that's probably just LSU. I don't have the metric in front of me when you have the composite level in front of you. Is it just LSU and Bama within the division? Probably. I know they play other teams, but in the East, it's probably just Georgia. That's has a better roster in terms of where they were as recruits. So that's all they have to do is simply out talent and not lose winnable games. And they get there. They ascend. Now, easier said than done, but you talk to any A&M fan and you can bring up at least one game every season where it will cause them to collapse upon themselves, that they will implode thinking about Oh, that year's Mississippi State game. Oh, that year's App State game. Oh, that year's Ole Miss game. Oh, that year's LSU game. Not just losing to a better team, but cause them to emotionally implode. And gotta get past that.
Write in. Let us know on social media, on Twitter at Solid Verbal.
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, solidverbal@gmail.com if you prefer the old email. Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. Next week, we will be shifting gears and we will be examining schedules, conference by conference. We started putting our little matrix together. From the weirdos that brought you the gumpiness of Texas Tech last season, we will be looking for that again as we go through each of these conferences. We'll start in the SEC next week, and we'll be giving you a detailed schedule breakdown, what to look for, what not to look for. That'll feed nicely into our over-under discussion at some point in the next couple weeks. But I'm going to start breaking down schedules, Dan. It's actually starting to feel real now, the 23 season.
Can't wait. We're going to have to issue some sort of glossary ahead of time. Your letdown look ahead sandwich is pretty self-evident. But yeah, we like getting into gumpiness. Also, by the way, with A&M, and I looked at this with all of our teams as we conclude this 8-10 win, or 6-8, 8-10, whatever. Quarterback history is incredible looking at these schools because there's a reason, right? There's a reason why these schools. We're like, wait, okay, so we've got Nick Starkel, Zach Calzada, Trevor Knight, Kenny Hill, and then you start thinking about, okay, Texas A&M is probably already recruiting like a 2025 quarterback, right?
Right.
A 2025 quarterback is born in, again, help me with my math here, 2008?
Oh, God.
So 2008, if they're born in 08, in 2025, they'll be 17. Yes? Does that my math check out there?
Your math checks out, yeah.
That means they were 4 years old when Johnny Manziel was thriving. So they're almost. So we're talking about. No, I mean this is. I'm bringing it back full circle. But it's just like you want your recruits to remember watching your most recent star at quarterback or at whatever position. But in Texas A&M's case, that's their bright shining star above all bright shining stars. And now we're aging out of recruits having. I mean, look, they can watch on YouTube, obviously, but that's an interesting thing with a place like Texas A&M, and all these, most of these schools that we're talking about have struggled to find a guy at quarterback, which is why we're talking about them. But I didn't quite do that math until I went back and looked at their quarterback history, and just like, man, Kenny Hill transfers, Kyle Allen didn't work out, Kyler Murray didn't work out, and they, Trevor Knight, Nick Starkel, Zach Calzada, because of injury, Kellen Mond was fine, but are there guys from the 2025 class saying, ever since I saw Kellen Mond, I knew I wanted to be an Aggie? Maybe. It seems unlikely.